Welcome to Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. Hey, that's me. Hi, and welcome to Positive Talk. Our show features the best positive stories and people from around the globe as we endeavor to answer the universal question of why am I here and what is my purpose? Understanding that can change everything, and knowing your greatness is fundamental to living your best life. So join us right now as together we work to create the adventure of our lifetime. So everybody wants to create the adventure of their lifetime, but unfortunately, sometimes we get lost in all the guck and stuff that goes through life. Well, we have a guest today who is in the middle of doing the adventure of a lifetime. She is she's a podcaster, and she also is a heart-centered person she's been on the show before, and we just loved having her on. So I wanted to have her back because she's what I call a really cool cat. Okay, maybe that's a play on words a little bit, but her name is Kat. And give me your last name just so I don't screw it up.
Polsinelli.
Polsinelli, and I imagine are you Italian?
I am Italian.
I imagine that Sunday afternoons at somebody's house, they have a great big feast every now and again.
It used to be that way. Now my boys are older, and so everybody wants to do their own thing. But growing up, definitely. Oh my goodness, I used to love going to my great-grandparents' house. Yes, they were alive till they were like 90 something. And that was the thing, was all the food and the different stuff to try and all the conversations. We Italians tend to have like 6 conversations going at once, and my poor husband, I felt so bad. I was like, honey, just nod your head while we just talk back and forth. And I'm going to talk to about 3 people and it'll be fine. Like just...
Well, I really love the different ethnic things that people do because of where they came from and the old country. And I imagine your grandmother, when she was up there in age, but I bet you she put on a hell of a show on Sundays.
Oh my goodness, yes. And they were like the cutest couple. They came to Italy when they were young, or younger. And my grandfather absolutely adored my grandmother. And he would tell her how beautiful she was and come give me kisses. And she would start getting onto him in Italian. It was the best thing as a kid growing up. It was always entertainment, whether it was food or something, theatrical that was going on. It was always a lot of fun.
I just love that. So tell me about yourself and how you got to where, because what I love, you've got a website called The Lotus Effect. And in The Lotus Effect, you say, we believe real success comes from finding strength in your struggles, owning your story, and choosing who you want to become. With self-compassion, honesty, and courage, you can turn your scars into your greatest strength and create the life that you love. Now, I'm assuming then that your life has not necessarily all been cupcakes and roses, that there were moments in time when you learn valuable lessons, and they can be kind of negative at the same time.
Definitely valuable lessons. I'd love to say those lessons were short. I feel like some of them drug out for quite a while. I had a really great childhood growing up. I have 2 younger sisters. My family is still together. I was always a high achiever. I always strive for more things. And then I became a rebellious teenager. Like a lot of us did, right? And I kind of went the opposite direction. I started trying to, do things behind my family's back. I wanted to be with the cool kids. And while I didn't get in trouble, because, I still loved being good in school, because I was a high achiever. What ended up happening was I started looking for love in all the wrong places. And I feel like every teenager does this, right? And so I found myself pregnant at the age of 16. I had to find an alternative school that I could take my son to. I left my high school dream of singing. I was in choir and all kinds of stuff. I left my softball career that I had been doing for almost 15 years. Or I guess I did 15 years total at the time. And I decided to be a mom. So I went to a school that I was had the ability to graduate a year early. So I graduated when I was 17 as a junior. And I did what every kid did at that time. I went straight into college. I got a full-time job. My son came to work with me, and I started being a parent. I mean, I didn't know what else to do. And I had a lot of other friends, actually, weirdly enough, that got pregnant around that time. But it was all kind of the same thing. Everybody still wanted to be a teen. And I was like, I refuse to be that way. Like, I'm going to make things right. And so that's what I kind of led with. And then that also led into more teenage decisions of being rebellious and being like, hey, I'm doing this and I'm doing this and I'm doing this. Look at me. And so I left. I left my family at 17 and a half and moved out with a boyfriend, another one. And I ended up having my second son at 19. And what I thought was going to be the beginning of a beautiful relationship, as we all think at that age, turned into 10 years of abuse. So I got out when I was 28. My boys were 10 and 7 at that time, and started the next book of my life of honestly surviving. Now that was 10 years ago that I got out of that relationship. So my boys are now 20 and 17. That's a whole nother stress era. But I
Teenage boys, there's nothing quite like them. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. No, I love my boys, and for what they've been through and what they've seen, like they really have done a tremendous job in making decisions in their life and leading themselves. So I'm very blessed in that aspect. But yeah, I did what a lot of people do, which is why I talk about those invisible scars. And that is, all the emotional and psychological trauma that I went through. I just, I took it and I was like, oh, you're nasty. And I put it in a box. And went on about my way. I was like, I don't have time for this. I have 2 kids. I have a full-time job. I was working 40, 50 hours a week at the time. And my family graciously took me back in. They had 1 spare room. So I started over. I filed for bankruptcy. I bought my first car at 28. I bought my first cell phone at 28 because I wasn't allowed to have a car or a cell phone.
Wait a minute. You were in a relationship for that long and he never let you have a car or a cell phone?
Nope. There was always an excuse. So I get this one a lot. I love that you asked this and that you're kind of surprised by it. I had a vehicle when I was like 16, and the transmission went out when I was about 19. And at that point in time, I didn't have a chance to fix it. I didn't have the money. I was kind of in a turmoil situation with my family. He had a vehicle, and so we used his. And then when we moved in together, it became our vehicle, except for our vehicle didn't travel anywhere unless he was in the car. So I'm the one that worked. I actually worked 2 to 3 jobs the entire time of our relationship. And I drove to work and dropped off, and then I was picked up. And for lack of better terms, the excuse for the phone was, well, you don't need it because I know where you're at and you have a work phone. I was like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. We don't need to spend the money anyway. I was barely scraping by with 2 kids and paying rent. And so you get to a point to where, you fight so much, kind of like when you do with your little kids, you fight so much and you fight so much when sometimes you're just like, you know what, go do what you want. And that kind of became my relationship. And that ended up, unfortunately, kind of becoming my mindset as well. And then as that started to pick up and I stopped fighting as much, I then ultimately started believing that what he was saying was true. So, when there were conversations about like different things and he made the suggestion, I might argue, but then he'd make points and I'd be like, maybe I am the crazy one. Maybe I'm not seeing that right. Maybe I am the one that is starting the problems. And so you really start to kind of turn on yourself in those kinds of relationships.
Now, would you call him a narcissist?
Oh, I hate this word. Okay, so I'll give you my opinion.
Well, tell me why you hate this word.
Do what?
Tell me why you hate this word.
I hate this. Okay, so I hate this word, and the reason why I hate this word is everybody uses it. And I almost feel like it's a cop-out. Narcissism has become a word just like toxic positivity or toxic masculinity. It's become one of those words. It's just a way to label something to then write it off. Yes, he was very narcissistic. Yes, he was very controlling. Um, there is a very good possibility, not diagnosing, but based on a lot of the things that I've read and some of the things that he probably had a disorder, right? He was either bipolar or borderline personality disorder. There's a lot of things that really match up with stuff like that. But I didn't understand any of that. And he sure as heck was not going to go get anything fixed because there was nothing wrong with him. So, yes, he did have a lot of narcissistic tendencies, but I personally feel like there was a lot more going on that created those narcissistic symptoms because of some undiagnosed issues and traumas that he faced as a child as well.
So now you worked. What the hell did he do?
Sat at home.
I suppose it's good work if you can get it, if you can find, if you can find. So his job basically was to take you to your work and then take you to your other work and then take you to your other work and then take you home. And he sat there and just kind of hung out and told you about the show that he had just binged or the things that he was doing in life that were not, and I can't imagine why a man would do that to someone that he loved. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And there's a lot more depth to that versus what we all see and understand because we're generally good people. So it doesn't make sense to us. And this is not at all mean that what he did was right. I am not giving that at all. What I'm saying is traumas and things that we face, especially as young kids, mold the perspective and the way that we treat others and the way that we see what is right and wrong. And those don't always align with the general population. And unfortunately, his childhood wasn't the best, and what he saw growing up wasn't the best. So, in his mind, he was illuminating what he had always seen. And so, for him, it was normal. For me, it was not.
So now, did his dad not work too?
No, his dad did. His dad did work, but it was a very tumultuous relationship between his parents. Um,
Yeah.
and just like I hate to say this, sometimes you have kids that are bullies. You find out that it's because of something going on at home, whether something they're not getting or something that their parents are reflecting back to them that are creating those outputs, right? And
I think that happens more than we'd like to admit.
unfortunately. And in those unfortunate situations, that then turns this child into potentially an unproductive or a what everyone would call narcissistic human being, unfortunately. And it really just depends on what somebody decides that they want to do with their life or not to do with their life. And that's what then creates the reality that we decide to live in. And sometimes for those, it's, I want to live in this because that means nobody can hurt me and I'm fine with that. And for others, it's realizing that this is not working and I can't keep hitting rock bottom and I want to do something different. So it's choosing your hard or choosing your known easy.
Yeah, and while you were talking there, I was just thinking about my upbringing, and that my dad worked 6 days a week and he was gone a lot and stuff. He brought in the bacon and my mom stayed home, but that which was more in those days the traditional look to it. But I can see because I've always been a hard worker. And I don't know that had anything to do with me. That's what I saw growing up. And so that was what I emulated, although I made some changes because when you're working that hard, he wasn't necessarily such a good dad when I was a kid, because he didn't want to. He wanted to come home and drink his beer and eat peanuts and be left alone. In any event, we are products of how we grow up in a lot of cases, is my point.
Yeah, we are. And then it takes you deciding if what you saw and what you've been doing is how you want to continue your life or if you want to do something different. I know a lot of people that have had really terrible upbringings and they're the best people in the world. But that's an active choice that they decided to make because they saw that there was a different way to do that. And unfortunately, when we're in that teenage young adult phase of trying to figure all of that out on top of everything else that's going on, we don't always necessarily make the best decisions to realize that something can be different. And sometimes choosing that different, meaning you don't know what the outcome is, you don't know how people will take it, you don't know what would happen, is a lot scarier than saying, well, even if I'm a jerk, I at least know what's going to happen. I at least know if I yell at somebody that this is the outcome. You're able to have a lot more predictability in your life. And that we as humans prefer that. And that unfortunately gets us caught in these cycles, which is what it caught me in for a really long time.
I got to ask you, when you were 16, were you one of those kids that went out the window at like 9 o'clock at night to then snuck out and hung out with friends for a while?
Oh, goodness, no. I lived out on 65 acres in the middle of the woods. And if the door creaked, my father knew it was going on. So that's why it's really interesting to share my story, because I wasn't like this party kid that got away with things that then kind of led down this path. It was literally one instance. I found a boyfriend when I was 15. I thought I was in love. And I unfortunately, due to me having more of an old school upbringing, there weren't a lot of things that were communicated in our household in regards to like maybe tell somebody no when they do certain things, but like just things to be aware of. And so because I was the hardworking, keep pushing, but also kind of a people pleaser because of that, because I wanted my parents to love me and appreciate me for that, that also transitioned into my relationships as well. And I became that people pleaser and, oh, it's okay kind of a thing. And you downplay yourself, which is easy for you to do anyway at the age of 15, 16, 17. I mean, hormones are all over the place. You don't know who you are. Psychologists even state that literally in the teenage brain, half of them want to be a child and stay that small, and half of them want to be an adult. You're constantly battling yourself.
Yeah, boy, and the interesting thing is when you were a good girl and you got good grades, we don't need to talk to her about, like, I don't know, sex and that kind of stuff. It's not really something that we need to go into. Unfortunately, sometimes, well, this, the drill. We're talking with Kat, and we're gonna be right back, and we're gonna talk about why she calls her website the Lotus Effect and what that is all about, and her podcast. And she's just a delightful human being, and I hope that you'll take the time to listen to her podcast and get to know her. But we'll be right back, and stay right where you are. It's only 30 seconds, so be quiet. Are you looking for a powerful way to grow your brand while making a real difference? Well, Positive Talk is the perfect platform to align your message with inspiration, hope, and meaningful conversations. By sponsoring Positive Talk, your brand will reach an engaged audience that values positivity and connection. People who want to support companies that share their values. Take this opportunity to showcase your business in a space that uplifts, inspires, and creates lasting impact. Don't wait. Email me, Kevin@kmmedia.pro today to learn how you can partner with us and spread positivity while growing your brand. And welcome back to Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald, everybody. I've got a great guest for you today. Her name is Kat
Polsinelli.
Well, one of the running gags that I use, and it's really not a gag, it just kind of is the way it is that I have trouble with last names. I don't do them all that good. So, but she is with us, and she's got a website. She's got a great podcast. She is in the same world that I am in, and in my belief that we can honestly live a better life if we choose to. But there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes in with that. But I suspect the Lotus Effect is one of those things that you use to help motivate yourself and others. Explain the Lotus Effect.
Yes. So I love that we're in the same space. And yes, the Lotus Effect, Funny enough, actually came out of me wanting to rebrand a company I had built about almost 5 years ago. And I was like, not attracting the right people. This isn't the direction I want to go. I need a new name. And funny enough, I actually fought for the longest time. I was like, I'm not going to use a Lotus. I'm not going to use a Lotus. Everybody uses a Lotus. And but what's really funny is the Lotus is super symbolic to me. So when I came out of my abusive relationship a few years down the road, I kept looking for something for a symbol, for something to remind me that like this wasn't the end, that even though I've had hardships, even though I was going through crap, I could still emerge out of that. And the Lotus always came back to me as that symbol. The lotus itself grows out of mud. It grows out of the crappiest water. And yet when it rises to the surface, it's absolutely beautiful. And so it was the first tattoo that I ever got was a lotus. And ultimately I was like, you know what? When I think about the conversations that I have with people, when I think about the way that I speak with people when I'm on stage, and when I think about when I was doing coaching, the way that I talk with people, I am taking them through the journey of the lotus. I meet people where they're at and whatever muck that they're in and help them figure out how to get to that surface and allow them to decide how they want to break through and how they want to look when they rise to that surface. And so that ultimately became the name of the Lotus Effect, because the Lotus journey was what I took everyone on. That was the effect that I was creating. And then from there, you have the ability to allow that to ripple out into the universe and into the people that are around you. And so it was extremely fitting. And then funny enough, I actually Googled it after we named it. And I found out that the Lotus Effect is actually a scientific term. Yes, you can Google it. So if you Google the Lotus Effect, one, I'll come up. But two, the Lotus Effect itself is actually a scientific term that speaks into the way that there are specific pieces on the petals of the lotus, so that when it rises to the surface, the mud and the muck and whatever was there rolls off of it onto the water, and it does not stay on the petals of the lotus. And to me, I was like, oh my gosh, that symbolizes even more that we are not dirty, that we are not broken, that it's just part of the journey that we have to take until we decide to let it roll off of us and be who it is we want to be.
That is a great metaphor.
Isn't it?
I
Thank you,
mean,
science.
you're combining science and real stuff, but because we all do that, and there are some of us, sadly, who choose to stay in the muck and don't necessarily want to roll off of it, because this becomes who they are, and it becomes a badge of honor almost. Look at what happened to me and all of these things, and this is the reason I am where doing what I'm doing and being who I'm being, rather than to say, I'm going to clean myself off and I'm going to live the life that I truly wish to live. You obviously are in the process of doing that. By the way, what business was that you changed the name of?
So the original business was called Agent Services. I actually did a lot of coaching with real estate agents, funny enough. When I jumped out of the medical field, I jumped into real estate. And while I sold real estate, I found myself quickly working on the corporate side with one of the largest companies in the world. And I was asked to handle their agent coordination. And I took over teaching and training. And then I started helping people strategize in their businesses. And it just kind of became this thing, which then opened the doors to, oh my gosh, there are people all over the place that run their own business that need this help. And so I quickly became like enthralled into all of these things. But what it did was it then led me to the next step of what I enjoyed doing.
I got to ask you, when they came to you and said, oh, we think you're dynamic and you're great, and we would like to promote you and we'd like you to do this, what was the first thought that ran through your head based upon your growing up and your marriage and stuff? Was like, are you talking to me? You must not be talking to me. That must be somebody else who you're talking about, because I'm certainly not worth it. Did any of that run through your head?
I would say that it was definitely like a twinge, where you're like, ooh, you ever got somebody where they like give you that compliment and they're like, oh my gosh, you're just amazing. And you're like, Thank you. But deep down, you're like, ew, I don't really know why you said that to me. It was, I'm just being real, people. But
Yeah,
it was like that. I was honored, and my brain started going of like, oh my gosh, we could build all these things out, and this is my space, and this is what I want to do. And then I was like, thank you. That's okay. Uh,
you as a great podcaster like you are, and doing the coaching like you are, and the speaking like you are, you get compliments all the time. And the hardest thing for people who get compliments all the time, I deflect them, which is something I'm working on, because it's like when somebody says, "Man, I love your show and it's great and you're awesome," and it's like my first thought is, okay, what do they want and how much money is it going to cost me? And and the second thing is, are you talking to me? I don't think you're talking to me. And because it's like, oh yeah, right. But at one point in time, we have to recognize that we are all born great, and we have to recognize our own greatness. Do you agree with that?
I do agree with that. And I think that that is where inner confidence comes from, being okay with, as I said on the top of my thing, owning you, owning your scars, owning your story, and realizing that that doesn't define you. It's just a part of you. And that's what continues to create the version of you that you want to be. Because you always have that choice, right? Whether you're choosing to grow and do something that scares you so that you can get better, or you choose to stay where you're at because that's comfortable and you know what's coming, you are still choosing that path regardless. And that was a really hard one for me to understand and accept, and especially own.
Owning it is key to own your greatness and to understand that. But most of us don't, because growing up, we're taught, hey, you ain't so great. You could have you get an A minus. Like in your case, you were a good student. So it's like you get an A minus and you take the report card home and somebody says, you could have gotten an A if you just worked a little bit harder and stuff. And in my case, it was, you could have gotten a D if you worked just a little bit harder. Uh, so, but did that ever happen to you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we had expectations. And I'm not saying that having those expectations are a bad thing, because I think that it created a space in me where I do push a little bit further, because I'm like, oh, but I know I can do it. And on the other side, because there was so much push and such a high level that I was expected to always be at, it also created a lot of perfectionism. So there's a twofold, right, to that one. But nobody's going to get, like, there's no perfect plan to parenting. You're doing the best you can do with the knowledge that you have at that time. I don't care how many books you read, right? And so I do believe that it is our job, once we become adults, to then choose, what do we want to be known for? What is our greatness? How do we want to lead ourselves now that we get to choose how we see ourselves? Not what everybody else sees, not what everybody told us. It's a lot of where limiting beliefs tend to come from, as they talk about what you've collected when you were younger. And I do think that that is now our responsibility. And that's then our choice to make the decision of the direction that we want to go. And it doesn't come without its challenges, right? I'm not saying that pathway is paved in gold, because it's not. There are a lot of potholes, and I've fallen in a few. But you are the one that gets to choose it. And when you can look at your life in that regards, not saying that you chose the bad things that happened to you, but when you look at it, like, I decided to go down this path, and because of that, this kind of led to this, and because I didn't say no to that, that kind of led to that. When you can find the lessons in that and stop beating yourself up over choosing that path, because it's already done, it's not like you can go back and fix it. You
No.
then get to use those lessons to choose how you want to do things in the future, which makes things so much better.
And you can get out of whatever it was, whatever that story is that you're telling yourself. you can get out of that story and to create a whole brand new story. And
Yeah.
that can be very, very empowering. Speaking of which, we're talking with Kat.
Polsinelli.
Thank you. go to her website, which is the-lotus-effect.com, and find out all about her. And you can even, there's even a link to her podcast. And I have to tell you, she's a very gifted podcaster. And we're gonna, when we come back, I want to talk. You can just say thank you. And yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And when we come back, I want to talk about what got you into doing that, and what do you like about it? I mean, I know what I like about doing, this, because I can't do anything else and I have no life, but it works for me. So when we come back, I want to delve into that, and also the fact that you are younger than most people who have that epiphany of saying, I can do more. Why am I really here? What am I here to do? I was 42 when that came upon me, and I think you were a little bit younger than that. But you had, well, we won't go there. But we need to take we need to take and people are going, what was she gonna say? Dang it! We're going to take this quick break, and we will be right back. I promise.
You're listening to Brushwood Media Network, the best in syndicated talk, news, and entertainment shows.
As you go about your daily life, look closer. As you gather with family and friends who love and support you, look closer. There are youth right in your community who don't have the home, warmth, and healing you have. So look closer. Every year across America, a staggering 4.2 million youth are homeless or trafficked. And for 50 years, Covenant House has worked relentlessly to keep them safe and protected. Tonight, 2,000 young people will sleep safely in a Covenant House bed. And tomorrow, they will wake up surrounded by love. They get clean clothes, hot meals, medical care, and a safe place to sleep. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In sites across America to help them fulfill the great promise of their lives. So look closer at Covenant House. To help or get help, go to covenanthouse.org.
And welcome back to Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. And I just have to say, I really wish that I did not have to play that commercial. I wish that Covenant House did not need to exist, but sadly, we don't live in that world. And so do anything you can to help the youth of America become the adults of tomorrow, and are smart and are caring and are loving and are kind, because that's how we're going to change the world. Okay, enough of my personal announcement. But I think you agree with that, don't you?
I do really agree with that. I do wish that there were things like that that did not have to exist, but I do appreciate those that create those spaces, that recognize that we need that, and those that volunteer their time to things like that and dedicate to working on making it the best that they can.
So I want to touch bases with you on, because I was in radio in 2003 and was on a radio station and all of that, and learned how to edit and all that kind of stuff. When did you decide, hey, I have an idea. Why don't I do a podcast?
I decided to do a podcast a little over 2 years ago. And it started with, I think it'd be fun. And I also thought it would be a really great way to connect with people as a way to grow my business. I'm really big on personal referrals and personal connections. And so the thought process was, I get to interview, we get to share knowledge, they get to see me, I get to see them, and then we get to create this beautiful space of, I know people that would be great for them, and vice versa. And so that's where it started. And then it turned into, I love sharing people's pivots and failures, because we don't have enough of that being shared openly in the world without it being pushed to, well, this is what I went through, but this is where I'm at now. And that's where the conversation tends to stay. And I wanted to create a space where people could find support and find connection in hearing what others had to say, and sprinkling in some business tips while we're at it. Because, entrepreneurs, we are the ones that have decided to take on this crazy journey of, I'm okay, I'm terrible, I think I'm happy, I don't know what's going on, I think we're back down. We decided to be on this roller coaster. It is, let me tell you, it's the biggest growth opportunity you'll ever have in your life. And so I wanted to share that, and I wanted to share it in a capacity that for some of the podcasts that I had been on, especially in the beginning, I didn't feel like they were sharing. Nothing against them. I loved all the people I was on with, but there were quite a few that were very edited, that even when they would send me the videos afterwards, they spliced a lot of things together. And I'm like, that's not what I was saying. And I didn't want to create a perfect presentation and a perfect world, because nobody is perfect. And I'm sorry if you think that. You might want to read a book. But I wanted to, sorry.
Or two, or three, or four.
Just saying. But I wanted people to see that, like, everybody screws up, everybody fails, everybody gets in front of other people. And that's our biggest fear is, oh my God, they're going to judge me. What if I don't say the right thing? What if it didn't come across this way? Who cares? Like, I know that one person in this audience listening is going to connect with what I'm saying and go, oh my God, that is my person. And then there's going to be somebody else that's like, oh, she is cuckoo. I'm okay. That's fine. I'm fine with both of them. I'm not for everybody. I'm okay with that. And I wanted to have a podcast like that where people could see me having fun and screwing up and know that, like, that does not diminish the conversation, the story, and the impact behind what the message was that we were sharing.
And that, by the way, is the most important part. I don't edit these things because I am far, far, far from a perfect human. And a lot of times it comes out in these things, but you have to be, it's important for us to be real and to feel good about what we're doing as far as the reality of it. Because I'm, like I said, just talk to my ex-wife. She'll tell you I'm far from perfect. So it's like,
leave that one alone.
Yeah, I would. Because there ain't no winning there, I'm telling you. But it's important because I was listening to your the last podcast that you did, and she was talking about, getting on podcasts and how to be a good guest and all of that. And she had some really, really good points. One of the things she said is, when you're starting to podcast, you have to find your niche. You have to really niche down and to find what you're doing. And also, it's great to be in support of a business when you're doing a podcast, because you're not liable to make any money doing the podcast in and of itself. And so, because there are so many of them. And so I was thinking to myself as I was listening, going, that's fine advice. Why didn't I take any of it?
Do you just like being difficult, Kevin?
No. I was told by a guy that bought my radio show, and then he tried to change me and change it. And we were sat there in a meeting, and he looked at me and he said, "You're not a very good employee," because I wanted to do it my own way. And that goes to this day. So, but her point was well taken. So go listen to her podcast. It's the last episode. It's Real Chat with Kat, and you'll get to, if you are crazy enough to want to do a podcast, and you think you're going to be Joe Rogan. First of all, I got to tell you, you ain't going to be Joe Rogan, and secondly, there's a lot of work to it. And how have you handled that? Is it taking? I know you're doing one a week, and you're faithfully. What day do you release the new one?
Every single Friday we release a new episode, and then I record one every Thursday. But my podcast is booked out. We're booked into April already, and the episode doesn't go live for a month and a half after I record. And that was actually what worked best for me. And I've seen tons of people do it tons of different ways. I always tell people that like consistency is key, right? So twice a month, once a month. For me, I knew I wanted to release one every week. I like to talk a lot though, so that's it, but
But you have a lot of great things to say too.
oh, well, thank you.
Yeah.
I have a lot of really amazing guests as well that are really great at being able to have a conversation. I didn't want my podcast to be like interview style. I like what we are doing where there's a lot of back and forth and you're asking questions and I'm giving feedback and I'm taking what you say and building upon that. That is where people are learning. That's where people are taking in what they want to based on what they are supposed to hear at that point in time. And so that to me is like one of the funnest things about the podcast. And I learned so much from so many people. And I guarantee you, I can tell you that more than 75% of my podcasts, when I am recording them, there is something in there that I'm like, ooh, well, that was talking to me. Oh, well, that was a reminder. I'm like, okay, fine. I get it. Okay. I'm listening. That's kind of the beauty of it is getting to get my own feedback on it and my own intake, and then also be able to share that so that other people get to take away what they heard from that as well.
and and at the same time, you got to be kind of careful about the podcasts that you go on.
You do.
I was
do.
talking, I was talking with a gal a little earlier. Excuse me. Her name is Bambi Lynn, and she's been on 4 different live podcasts. These are live ones, and each one of them said, "So, what made you think of writing about medieval sex?" And her book was nothing about that. It was about her story growing. And so she would say, "A what?" Because there's another Bambi on Amazon that talks about medieval
Oh,
sex. And so they didn't do their research. And so it was a very embarrassing moment for everybody. But I know you do your research, and I just have the best time talking to people. And you are one of the very best guests that I've had on. And I just we for you and me, it's like a dance.
yes. Yes. That's the fun about it though, right? That's what people are looking for. People want to be entertained. Don't say you don't. Everybody wants to be entertained.
Yeah,
I don't care.
exactly.
And you also want to learn something, but not everybody is into listening to the documentary that is featured by, like, not everybody is into that kind of stuff, right? So how can you have fun with it? And how can you still ask questions and share information? And to me, podcasts are one of the greatest ways to be able to do that. And it's a lot easier for people to comprehend that because they don't always necessarily have to sit down and stare at it, right? You can be working out, you can go do a jog, you can be, I don't know, whatever you do to your podcast. I'm not judging. But you get to have a lot of fun with it. And I just think it's the beauty of finding people that know also how to conversate in that way so that there is depth and there is meaning and there's inspiration and there's motivation and there's laughter. And that's what we're looking for. But the best part is it's not scripted. It's not something from TV. It's not something we have to make believe. This is real life. And I do this all the time with everybody. So whether I'm on here or not, like that's who I am as a person. So you get to experience me, whether you like it or not, just to each his own.
Well,
But you get to experience.
you're an adorable human being, and you've had a lot of life experience, and you're now taking that into a very positive place and are helping people understand that what you've gone through is not indicative of who you really are, and you can be who you really are at any time that you choose to. That's the
Yes.
part that people, "Oh no, I could never do that. I'm not good enough. My voice is too squeaky," like being on a podcast or whatever. It's like you have a great radio voice, and that's why I do radio and not TV much. But in but it's it's interesting that people set their own limits of what they believe that they can do, and that really is a shame, don't you think?
It is. And I hate that because a lot of times those beliefs have been put on us because of other people, and we don't even realize that. I'll tell you a story. So I remember having a conversation, and I was working in the corporate sector for the brokerage that I worked for, and I really enjoyed what I did. And you always get people that are people, and I had a couple of people that like complained, like two. Okay, not like a ton, two. But the feedback that I got was, you're really hard to talk to. You're really hard to have a conversation with. And some people feel like you're really standoffish. And I was like, well, that's really funny because like everybody's in my office all the time. Like I can't get work done. That's why I have to shut my door. And I didn't think at the time that that really meant anything. But what I realized was even now, so last year, I had a friend of mine that we're doing some stuff together and we were partnering on some things. And she was like, like this is part of what you're doing too. And I was like, yeah, but I don't know, it's your thing. And I kept separating myself, and we started kind of talking about it. And I said, I just didn't want to be that person. And she's like, what are you talking about? And I was like, I just, the person that's standoffish or like rules everything and thinks she's better than everybody. She was like, where did that come from? And I was like, well, I mean, I was told that when I worked in corporate a lot, like there were several times, and I let that become my identity. I let somebody else's opinion define me and who I was. And that was like an epiphany. I was like, oh my gosh, how many other things of these are sitting in my brain? But that's really how we choose to be who we are, is we let, again, not consciously realizing it, but we let things that have happened to us define how we then move forward in things. Funny enough, I never thought I'd be a speaker. Never thought I'd be a speaker. I love being on stage. I love to sing. Never thought I would be a speaker. You want to know why? When I was in college, I was required to take a speech class, and I was so excited. I wrote my speech. I was like, man, I'm great at memorizing stuff. And I got up on the podium and I was giving my speech. And as anybody that is watching this can see, I use my hands a lot. Okay. Use them a lot. And
you're Italian. What are you supposed to do?
I don't know how to keep them still. And I actually was critiqued for that. And I was told that nobody would want to listen to me unless I kept my hands to my side because it was too distracting. And so I never wanted to be in the speaking arena because of that. Again, because of an opinion, somebody else's opinion that they put on me because of their belief and their perception. I let that define what I was going to do and not going to do.
It's such a shame because that happens to all of us. And it depends on how well you take that story that somebody else is giving you. We need to take our last break. And then I've got a real quick story about stories when we come back. So stay right where you are, everybody.
Last week, Brandon met a girl on a dating app. One day after work, he finally found the courage to ask her out. No answer. He started to panic. Was he being too pushy? Maybe it was too...
Hey, sorry I didn't respond. I was driving. I would love to go on a date. How does tonight sound?
Brandon tried to play it cool, but inside he knew. A girl so smart, so responsible. She must be a keeper.
And welcome back to Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. And I love that. And although I got to ask you, have you ever had anybody text you and say, I meant to text you and you want to go out on a date? And have you ever said, oh, sure, I'd love to go. Let's go tonight.
Yeah, that was the first thing that pops in my brain the very first time somebody texts me. Yeah, that's exactly how we work.
So let me tell you this story real quick. I went to a seminar one time, and I won't say who it was with because they may sue me. But there were like 100 people in the room, and there was a facilitator at the front. And we spent Friday night, Saturday, and half of Sunday and people would get up and tell their story. I had this happen to me. I had that happen to me. My mother and I haven't had a relationship. And then he would work through and talk about how they could fix that or deal with it and all that kind of stuff. And then it was like at 1 o'clock on Sunday afternoon, everybody had been there for a long time, and we started to know everybody's story. And he said, by the way, I just want to say that the stories that we've been talking about for the last day and a half, and everybody nodded. He goes, you made it all up. What? How can you say that? My story is important. And he said, no, you made it all up. You are not the result of your story. You're the result of what you think your story was based upon what somebody else told you. And then he said, by the way, I want you to know something. And this, to me, this was the most powerful thing that I took away from it. He said, I want you to know something. Your life is empty and meaningless. And people started to get up and go, wait a minute, my life has meaning. I don't know what one was a fundamentalist Christian, and he started talking about, anyway, all of that kind of stuff. And it offended a lot of people. And he said, no, you don't understand. Your life is empty until you decide what you're going to fill it up with. Your life is meaningless until you, nobody else, you assign meaning to it. So I thought that was kind of brilliant, that we have every day that we get up, we have the ability to decide what our day is going to be like, who we're going to be, how we're going to act, what's it all going to be. And we have that power over ourselves. Does that make sense?
It does. And it's so funny because I actually heard someone not too long ago that kind of used something similar. And it was an older recording that I happened to see online. And that's what he said was, I don't mean it in the way that you all use the word meaningless, but life does not have meaning until you choose to give meaning to it. So in my personal opinion, I take that as being from someone that has been on both sides. For a really long time, it was everything happened to me. And then it was, I'm a victim of all these things. And that's the reason why I act this way and do these things. And I wasn't fixing anything. I wasn't looking to repair any of those problems that I was complaining about. I was just identifying and labeling them so that people knew why I was doing it. And then on the other side, I chose that, yes, this happened, but I learned so much out of it. And because I learned so much out of it, I now get to empower other people. So there was a reason why I went through it. There was a reason that I was supposed to learn the things that I did. Not only have I been able to help others, have I had the conversations with other people, have I been able to bring things to light and talk about domestic violence and trauma and the way that we actually can make a choice. I've been able to heal with my family. I was able to help my boys. I've been able to teach them tools that I was never taught at their age. I've even been able to have conversations with my parents to help them see things different that they had never thought about before because of what I went through and the work I decided to do. So again, it comes back to that choice, right? But the problem is it's not always an easy choice to make. And that's, I think, where people get stuck because they hear people talk about, you've got this choice, you can make these decisions, you can do things differently. But what they don't talk about is it sucks sometimes. I'm just going to be honest with you. Okay. It's not all butterflies and rainbows and fun. There's a lot of crying and screaming and leave me alone moments.
Change is hard.
It is. And it is so rewarding because you learn so much about yourself and then you get to take back that power and decide how you want to react to things and how you want to approach it. We don't have control of how things happen around us, but we can control how we react to it and allow it to affect us. And that to me is like the ultimate power.
Without that power, change can't exist, at least it's from my perspective. But you have the ability. Sometimes it takes a coach. Sometimes it takes somebody from the outside who can tell you how you're presenting yourself to the world, which may be very uncomfortable for you, because you didn't even realize how you were presenting yourself. And then that's when meaningful change can happen, because you used to be a coach, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I've had several, and you have to be open to know that you want to do different. That's going to be the biggest thing, and I've done therapy and all the things as well. Having somebody else look you in the eye and tell you, I think you're thinking this because of this. Ew. Just saying. Ew. Like, yeah, I know that you're right, but ew. But it opens up a space to give you a moment to be real with yourself. And then you get to choose. Like, okay, that makes sense. I can see that. Now I have a choice. Do I want to change it, or I want to continue in that pattern? The choice is yours. And that's what's going to define you. And again, being on the other side and choosing not to change it, and being where I'm at now, where I welcome that change and I welcome that hardship, because every time I do, I learn something else. And to me, it's the coolest thing, because I just keep discovering little things about myself and other people all the time. But you have to be able to be open to that conversation.
And you know what's interesting? Because I'm just a little longer in the tooth than you is. Okay, I'm a whole bunch longer in the tooth than you is. That when you start to then you look back, I have the ability to be able, now that I'm older, to look back at all the things that have happened, both good and bad, and I can put them into the categories and say, oh, this was part of my journey, and that's why that happened. Because then I can go to, this is what's happened next, and this is what happened next, and I can put together this puzzle of why it happened. And I truly believe that my guides on the other side and other folks were instrumental in taking me from one place to another. But that's just me. But it's important to have that self-reflection, and to be able to go, that's why that happened. Now I get it. And so it's like the 50,000 foot view. We don't get that. We're stuck in the trees, and there's somebody else that's has the blueprint of where we say that we would like to go, and their job is to help us do what we say we want to do. Does that make any sense at all, or do I need medication?
No, I got you. No, I do. I think that, we're born with this insight and this information, and because of the things that we go through, and because of the way that we choose and the way that we allow things to attach themselves to us or become who we are, we kind of venture away from a lot of that. And it is a little bit of hard work to be able to say, especially looking back, like, oh, that was a sign. I could have, but I chose to do this. But it's interesting how I still led myself back down this path. And we get that choice to be able to make those decisions every single day to get you closer to where it is that you ultimately want to go, or continue down the path that to you seems easier because you at least know the outcome.
I love having you on my show. You are so awesome. You are just so awesome. Now, we've run out of time, but I want you to, oh, it's the president calling. No, leave me alone, President. I would like you to tell our audience anything you would like them to know. And you got a whole 45 seconds.
Oh, a whole 45 seconds. Okay, let's go. I know that they always say that the road less traveled is what you should choose, but it really is true. I'm going to tell you this, though. Make your own path. And just know that you're going to have to cut trees down, and you're going to have to move a forest, and you're going to have to move things the way you want to be. And as long as you are okay with that, nothing can stop you.
Brilliant. Simply brilliant. And go to the Lotus Effect, which is the-lotus-effect.com. And also go to Real Chat with Kat, and on all the major podcast platforms. And I've always wanted to, you can go find that we're everywhere. Just go there. And you'll be fine. Thank you. I really appreciate having you here. Will you come back?
Of course I will.
So, isn't that wonderful? It's a podcast that doesn't suck. I think that's great. So, again, thank you so much for being here. Kat?
Polsinelli.
Polsinelli. And thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks for listening to this episode of Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. Our purpose is to provide everyone with a positive, entertaining, and educational experience. I would love your feedback and comments about the show, including possible topics and great guest suggestions. Please email me at kevin@kmmedia.pro. And remember, be kind to one another because each other's all we've got. That's Kevin at kmmedia.pro.